Greetings. Welcome to Pinello. This is Resident Evil 5. From my personal experience, it's actually quite difficult to find someone who hasn't heard of this game. I mean, being the sequel to one of the most celebrated games of all time, Resident Evil 5 sure had some massive shoes to fill. In 2009, this game would be the first HD Resident Evil and the greatest graphical shift in the series at the time. You can certainly tell that Capcom went big this time, given the overabundance of post-processing effects, especially the infamous color grading, which was so typical of this console generation. Either way, at the time of release, this was one of the most genuinely realistic games I had ever seen. It was before I knew what next gen even meant, but my mind was still completely blown. Graphics weren't the only remarkable thing about this game though, because it would be the first fully cooperative mainline Resident Evil ever released. There were spin-off games that had co-op, like Resident Evil Outbreak, but from start to finish, RE5 was the first numerical game to be playable in split-screen or online co-op. This also meant that you would always have a partner character, whether it's a human or a computer. You either love or you hate this design choice, and I'm not ashamed to say that I fall squarely in the camp that adores the partner mechanics of this game. The basic game mechanics have returned from RE4. Third-person, over-the-shoulder shooting with linear sections followed by massive horde engagements. And you'll be looting items or treasures along the way. The major differences come from a new inventory system and the addition of co-op mechanics I mentioned. In Resident Evil 5, your inventory is distilled into a 9x9 grid, and each item takes only a single grid space. This is unlike RE4, where you had a massive gun case and each item consumed a realistic amount of grid space. I won't lie, I think the inventory in RE4 is a stroke of genius, but that doesn't mean I think that the new system is bad or flawed. In fact, I see it as a sensible evolution, considering this game is about co-op and sharing inventory with another person. In RE4, every time you open your inventory, you pause the game entirely. This wouldn't work at all in an online experience, and I can't even articulate how annoyed I would be if my split-screen partner kept pausing the game just to swap guns. In RE5, you have quick swap slots, which are conveniently mapped to each direction on your D-pad if you're playing with a controller. And there is virtually non-stop action in RE5 since you can change guns and effectively change your gameplay on the fly. You can also use the new inventory to trade items with your partner. Have you found an herb that you could carry if only you had a single slot left? Simply ask your partner to hold on to it for you. Running low on a specific type of ammo? No problem. Just ask your partner for some of theirs. I love playing this game in split screen because I never get tired of the constant reshuffling of items and playstyles. Now, in order to prevent cheesing the game or becoming overpowered far too early, your options for trading items are slightly restricted in online co-op. Just don't expect your random partner from Germany to hand you a Magnum or rocket launcher from later in the game. It's not gonna happen. Resident Evil 5 marks the return of series veteran Chris Redfield and introduces us to newcomer Sheva Olimar. To match the action-packed gameplay, RE5 boasts an off-the-rails story, and I can't lie to you guys, they honestly jump the shark with this game's narrative.
Ugly.
I'm just saying, expect some eyebrow raising because I won't lie, this stuff is pretty wild. From my perspective, Capcom was just trying to recapture the cool factor that everyone went crazy about in Resident Evil 4. That game was so successful, and in their eyes, this was just a natural evolution of what made that game special. Now, I'm not saying that it was a good choice, I'm just trying to understand how they thought at the time. However you feel about it personally, I would argue that Capcom successfully innovated on specifically the gameplay of Resident Evil 4 by doubling down on that style of combat and exploration. Progress in this game is made constantly, as most areas consist of hallways peppered with enemies and items. Smaller areas typically lead into considerably larger areas where you will face a horde of enemies. I notice a lot of gamers criticize the linearity of this game, when it is literally a clone of RE4. I don't agree with the notion that linear is automatically inferior in some way. In fact, I think that tightly focusing your game can elevate the experience because the developers are able to create meaningful set pieces, which players can adapt to and anticipate on repeat playthroughs. By the way, if you only play a game once and shelve it forever, it's my opinion that you're playing games the wrong way. Just saying. Before you even start this game, you're forced to choose a game difficulty. In RE5, you are timed and ranked for every chapter you complete. Kills, player deaths, and accuracy are all graded. If you're the kind of completionist I am, you know what this means. Playing every chapter on the highest difficulty just to earn the best possible rank for each one. Resident Evil 5 has a persistent inventory mechanic which lets you take everything you've ever picked up or purchased into any game session, online or offline. The merchant from RE4 is sadly replaced by a rudimentary shop found within your armory. The armory allows you to customize your inventory before you start playing, including your partner's inventory if you're offline. This is also where you buy, sell, and upgrade your items. Streamlining the system is favorable in this game for much the same reason pausing every few seconds to change guns just wouldn't work in co-op. Look, I love the RE4 merchant just like the next person, but I just can't see how it would fit in the constant forward momentum of this game. But not all of this change is a good thing, don't get the wrong idea. There are sections of Resident Evil 5 that I absolutely hate. Anything where you are trapped in a vehicle or glued onto a turret is honestly terrible in my opinion. And don't even get me started on the fucking QuickTime events. These were both common tropes of this era of video games, and I have never enjoyed them. I just don't find an experience valuable when it nearly undermines every other facet of the gameplay. Your movement is restricted, your inventory is restricted, and you might as well be playing a completely different game. And I'm not saying I dislike these sections because they're all action. I'm saying that within the confines of Resident Evil 5 gameplay, they are just unwelcome. Resident Evil 4 has a boss fight where you are forced into a raggedy boat and your only choice of weapon is infinitely spawning harpoons. I see other players praising this fight and say what you want about vibe or aesthetics, but the gameplay here is awful too. My perspective is the same. Because you are literally trapped in the boat and you have no choice but to use the harpoons as a weapon. I try to complete sections like this as quickly as possible because, frankly, I don't want to play this when I've been having so much fun and freedom running around and choosing how I want to engage in gameplay. Consider this the end of my rant. The gist is that I despise turret and QuickTime sections. They completely destroy the pacing and my personal enjoyment of these games, and I'm relieved that design conventions have changed completely since then. Just like before, I want to avoid spoiling this game as much as possible in my video. However, I'd like to talk about a certain piece of post-game content known as the Mercenaries mode. Now, Mercenaries has been a recurring minigame in Resident Evil ever since Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. This is an arcade mode where the goal is to achieve a high score within a strict time limit. You start by selecting a level and a character, most of which will have a specific loadout that is unique to that character. Just like older Mercenaries modes, you can extend your time by collecting bonuses or by killing enemies in a spectacular fashion. For instance, melee kills will guarantee 5 extra seconds on your clock. Besides keeping an eye on the timer, you also want to rack up kill combos to multiply your score. Each kill will trigger a combo timer, so the objective is to constantly kill enemies and constantly build your combo while using your limited time efficiently. Back in the day, this is where boys would become big men Magini. If you wanted to be better than okay at Resident Evil 5, you were playing this game mode. Something I naturally learned by playing Mercenaries was that you can access your inventory even if you are performing an action. In fact, any action where your character is jumping, opening a door, or melee attacking an enemy, this is an opportunity to manage your ammo and inventory. For example, you can always reload your gun while your character is uppercutting a Magini. If you practice this technique, I promise that your weapons will never be empty and you will gradually eliminate every error in regards to planning and execution. I love that anyone can pick up and play Resident Evil 5, but few will actually master its gameplay. Playing at a high skill level is a totally different experience, which is honestly the case for most video games. For me, RE5 was the first game I felt excellent at playing, not just average or good. I wanted to share my enthusiasm for this game mode and hopefully encourage some gamers to dig deeper into the games they play. You may never know how fulfilling a game can be until you completely submit yourself to its mechanics. Resident Evil 5 was the first major game in the series to feature post-release content, which we call DLC. This came in the form of 2 mini-campaigns and several extra Mercenaries characters. I love how these mini-campaigns attempt to capture completely different principles of Resident Evil 5. One is focused on a slower pace and building a dreadful atmosphere. The other is a high-octane desperate escape, which shows us a glimpse at a piece of the story that went previously unmentioned. I personally believe that these separate story campaigns directly influenced Capcom when they were developing Resident Evil 6. In 6, you have the option to play 4 campaigns total, each with its own tone, characters, and perspectives. Well, there you have it. That about does it for Resident Evil 5. In my humble opinion, it is more than a successful iteration of Resident Evil 4. If you didn't catch my video on that game, you should honestly go watch it. I feel like everything I said about the previous game is applicable in 5, yet the major differences give it character and personality. While it is a major escalation in melodrama and action, I believe that it also captures everything masterful about RE4's design, and in the end, it's a valuable experience for any gamer who can appreciate a solid co-op game. Next time, I'm going to be talking about the epitome of black sheep, Resident Evil 6. Thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned.